This is a super special episode because I'm going to be interviewing my friend, Master Gardener Kim Castro, and we're going to be talking about beginner gardening. So if you kill everything like me, then this is going to be a really informative episode. Before we get into it, though, I have a few announcements for you. So, number one, if you're watching the replay of this in the Facebook group, type replay in the chat so that I know that you're watching. And if you have any questions, so we can always double back and answer any questions about gardening that you have. So that's one. Number two, if you're watching this in real time, today is what, March 26th. I have the workshop, the A1C workshop is happening tonight at 7 p.m. CST. So if you have not already gotten your spot for that, just DM me and I can send you the link. It's only $37. I'm going to give you a complete structure, food swaps, etc., and really help you manage your blood sugars. And this is also for people who just need some structure and discipline with their nutrition because FYI, a diabetic diet, quote unquote, is just a healthy diet. So I'm going to get on a call with you live and help you work through that and give you my structure. And then last announcement, April 11th is the last day to sign up for the Fit Figure formula for the April enrollment. So if you're interested in coming into my group program and learning about how to master your macros and your mindset, go ahead and click the link in that's pinned in the comments, and you can apply for the Fit Figure Formula group program before April 11th. Okay, so actually, let me make sure. Let me click on that. Okay, cool. Sometimes it doesn't work, but I think it's working today. Okay, y'all. So drop your questions. Beginner gardening. What questions do you have? I do have some questions that were dropped in the Facebook group. But first, Kimberly, introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Kim Castro, and you can tell Stephanie and I are long-term friends because no one calls me Kimberly except for good friends. Um, it's so nice being here. Thank you again for having me. I am a certified master gardener, a certified garden consultant. I grew up gardening um, on a small farm. The gardening was just kind of always part of my life. But as an adult, I didn't really get into really passionate about gardening until probably close to my late 20s, early 30s. Um, and it kind of just fell into my lap. I got into gardening for mental wellness, dealing with some pretty deep time in postpartum depression, and gardening kind of just found me. Um, and it really just flourished from there. I found that I could grow things and then I could make things like salsa that we could have all year long, and it has just become a total passion from there. Now I get to help others. As a master gardener, I'm pretty active in our community and helping just the general community in gardening, answering questions, and I garden all year long, all 12 months. Um, yeah, so a little bit about me, I guess the background. I do have um, a bachelor's degree in agricultural animal science. I was going to be pre-vet. That was kind of my goal, but I did take a lot of ag classes. And again, I was not striving to be a master gardener at that time. Um, but now looking back, a lot of those classes really did help me now. Um, Living here in a new home, which was neat to start over with a new garden. I've been here for about just over 2 years now. Mom of three girls, they garden a little bit, but it's not really a must or a force. I like try to like that, let that come about organically. Um, but even in all my years of gardening, I'm still constantly learning. Every season, every year, the gardening is always teaching me.
Yeah.
But
I
go
had
ahead.
kind of gotten into it a little bit when I first bought my house, and it was more so like flowers and things, and I got all into it. And then I did have some like herbs, and I think I had a peach tree that I did end up killing. Um, and yeah, I just haven't been great at it. So, like, if you are a beginner, Kim,
Mhm.
what is like the first thing that you need to kind of think through before you even like start anything? Like, what's the first question you need to be asking yourself?
So the very first question that I always ask everyone when they tell me they want to start a garden is why? What is your what goal do you hope to have out of gardening? Um, when I started, I just needed some uplifting, kind of the uplifting spirit that gardening provided for my mental health. So I didn't even really have plants in that I knew that I wanted to grow. I just was gonna just try to grow a few things. I had a lemon tree that was given to me, and I thought, oh, I'll start with that. Um, so why? Why do you want to garden? Do you want to have a salad year long? Um, do you really enjoy cooking and want to have herbs for random dishes? Perhaps you want to teach your children, a little bit where plants come from. Maybe perhaps you're homeschooling. That really kind of sets the tone on what we're looking for as far as gardening. And then the second part that I typically ask is how much time can you dedicate into the garden? Is this something that we're going to look into once a month? Um, then you're probably not looking into growing, a whole lot of things that require maintenance. Something probably a little bit more low key. Um, and then we kind of go from there. But very first question is to ask yourself, what do you hope to get out of this garden? Why do you want to garden? Is it maybe just for flowers? Um, or like what I like to call the salsa garden? Do you just want to have tomatoes and peppers and onions to make salsa? Um, so definitely a starting point. That's where I typically tell everyone to start.
Okay, so first question, why do you want to start a garden? I think that's a great first question. So get that answer in your mind. Why do you want to start a garden? And then the time. So you mentioned time and how much time you want to dedicate, because during COVID, we had started a garden and it was cute, honey. It was cute. And then the thing started growing and things got out of hand really quickly. And you need, in my mind, more space than you originally thought, because it looks really cute when you put the little things down and it starts to sprout a little bit. But then it started growing like out of control. And then I was like, okay, I don't think I don't think I can do all of these things. So it was fun. And you mentioned homeschool too. I think I was homeschooling for several years and we loved that and I had more time. So that's also something to definitely consider. So what do you feel like is like the easiest way to get started with a garden? Like, is it vegetables? Is it herbs,
Oh,
flowers?
the
What?
easiest, yes, easiest beginner friendly gardening is definitely herbs and salads, to believe it or not. Um, Tomatoes and peppers and those types of things, cucumbers, those are probably the most popular. If you go to a local nursery or even our grocery stores right now have um, lots of tomatoes and peppers out front, right? Um, and like you said, those start out really cute. It's kind of like a puppy, right? They start out really cute, and then some of them, like cherry tomatoes, for instance, cherry tomatoes can get 10 feet tall. So if you're not properly prepared for things like that, it can get very, very overwhelming. But herbs and salad is a definite, really easy, low maintenance starting garden. And it's a quick thrill because you can harvest pretty quickly versus, tomatoes and peppers, it's going to take months before you can get that first harvest. But salads and herbs is a pretty quick turnaround.
Okay, cool. Hey Teresa, Maria, Talitha, Octavia. Hey ladies, drop your questions if you guys have questions. Um, we're just talking about beginner gardening. So let us know what questions that you might have. Do you feel like him that you need like raised beds or can you plant directly in the ground? Because that's one of the things that I always was concerned about like um, either pesticides or runoff to get in my soil, and then I'm eating things that I
Mhm.
don't want to eat. Like, what is your opinion on that?
So I went to raised beds about 6 years ago. It was just about 2 or 3 years before I moved here. So, and let me tell you, raised beds is a game changer.
Okay.
Complete game changer. I will never ever go back. Um, Aesthetically, to me, I feel like it is so cute. If you're looking for aesthetics, a cute, like, let's go have a glass of tea or a glass of wine in the garden, it makes it possible. But as far as like how you're talking about the pesticides and to me, water, we're in Central Texas. During the summer, where you're just gonna struggle to just keep things alive. You can really isolate what's getting watered, right? In the ground, you're gonna water that entire surface area and everything around it. Um, you're really going to isolate where the nutrients go. So if you're, hopefully you're putting some good natural um, fertilizers like compost or worm casings and things like that. And the water. So between food and nutrients, you're really isolating where that goes, and you're not watering the entire yard or the whole entire area that they're planted. I can't speak more highly of raised beds. I currently have six in my what I call my microscopic yard. I have six raised beds, and I grow year round, and I grow a ton. I should probably do a tracking of it one time at one point, but I grow a ton of fruits, vegetables, salads, herbs, you name it. So to answer your question, I highly, highly, highly recommend raised beds. And they have some that start out at 6 inches. Um, and then there's some that go all the way up to, I think, like 42 inches. My dad, who is in his 80s and still gardening, he needs something that he doesn't have to bend over so much for. Um, I personally like the higher ones because you're really able to provide some root growth, which is going to be really important for those big plants like eggplants and tomatoes. Um, but even on the little short ones, you can still grow lots of things, and still provide some good isolation of where you're putting your food and your nutrients and your water.
Okay, cool. Yes to raised beds, people. Okay, that I got that. Hey Judith, thanks for watching. Octavia says, what can we plant now going into April that we can harvest this summer?
Oh, right now at the end of March, I feel like the gate is wide open. You are at the very end of seed starting. So I really, especially if you're a beginner gardener, don't worry about seeds or starting plants, tomatoes from seeds. Go to your local nursery, garden center, and get a few plants, if that's what you're starting with. And again, and I go over this um, in my garden consulting and coaching, but it really depends on your size. So if you have a 6 by 4 raised bed, so that's 6 feet long or and 4 feet wide, um, that gives you a certain square footage. And depending on your square footage is really depending on what you can plant. If you have just a little 1 by 1 square foot raised bed, um, you're not going to be able to plant 5 tomato plants, for instance. That's just your and really think that you're going to get any kind of harvest. So it really depends on your where you're planting, your square footage. Um, so I would start there. How much square footage do you have? Tomatoes are probably the most common, and tomatoes need 1 square foot of space. What's nice about tomatoes is that you can still grow lots of things underneath it. So you're going to take up that 1 square footage of space, but underneath it, I would still grow, throw in there some basil, some chives, perhaps a couple onions, a row of carrots, things like that, things that don't require a lot of square footage, but will benefit from the shade that the tomato plant provides. So to answer your question, really nothing is off the table right now besides the cold winter plants. And cold winter plants are things like broccoli and cabbage, the brassicas. Those are not going to fare well with warmer weather. And you're just going to run into a whole lot of trouble with pests. A broccoli plant won't even produce a head right now. It's just way too warm. So, anything spring, from herbs to lettuces to tomatoes to um let's see, I have peppers, eggplants, um Swiss chard, spinach, kale. Um I think the sky is the limit for right now. We're pretty much in the prime time of it right now.
So get your raised beds. Uh, get your. I know we want to talk about soil, right? Because I remember you told
Mhm.
me something about that and how important that is. Octavia, let me know if that answered your question. If you have a follow up, I did see that you said how big should the bed be for a starter, and I think you answered that correct.
Yes. So your bed can be, it any really it depends on what you want to grow and what you want to do. So you can plant a lot in a 4x4 bed, 4 foot by 4 foot square. You can do a lot with just that. Average yield from one cherry tomato plant is 10 to 20 pounds. So let that sink in. You don't need rows and rows and rows of plants that we think of when we think of a farm, right? Or a giant garden. One tomato plant will provide more than enough for a household, a typical household of 4 to 5 people. Um, I have two, and I'm constantly giving tomatoes, or cherry tomatoes in particular, to friends and family, coworkers, and things like that. So don't think that you need a whole lot of plants. Um, but so you can definitely start with something small.
Okay, yeah, that's good because I definitely think that you, in my mind anyway, I felt like I needed to have this and this and this and this and then multiple of those things. And yeah, it got out of hand really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yes.
you mentioned your garden consulting and coaching. I just want you to talk about that for a second because if you're watching and you need help, she does this virtually. So talk a little bit more about that.
Yes. I used to do it in person, but now just doing virtually, and it's been so beneficial and very helpful. Um, but if you are looking to start from scratch, a virtual garden consultant where we'll kind of go over your space. I'll need orientation, really kind of like what's east, what's west, that type of thing, because even that's important. Um, and then if you already have a garden established, or maybe even a garden space established, where you're just looking for coaching, to get a garden going, and you already have everything established as far as space wise, I provide kind of a package service. You can do a single coaching session, or even monthly coaching sessions. So those two things are available.
Okay, and we're going to drop the link. So if you are interested in virtual coaching or consulting, just let me know in the comments and we'll drop the link for you to contact Kim and y'all can, you know, decide if you want and work together. Dee, thanks for watching. Y'all let me know if you have any other questions. Let's talk about soil.
Hmm.
Like why? I guess I understand like a little bit of why that's important, but tell us like what are the main things we need to be looking for?
So I love that kind of mainstream big box stores now have what's called raised bed soil. 10 years ago, that was not available. We would have to do what's called a mix. You'd make your own mix. Um, and I have a pretty, if you're looking for bulk, there is a really good recipe, I guess. It's a 333 mixture. But if you're just getting started, and especially if you're getting starting small, the big box stores, Lowe's, Home Depot, they all have a raised bed mix, and I have not seen one that's terrible. So I feel like no matter where you can start, if you, as far as brand wise, I do have favorites, but um, I think any of the raised bed soils that you find um, will be fine. They'll give you a really, really great start. It needs to be airy. It needs to provide um, definitely some nutrients. So they're typically have a good starter nutrients mixed with compost things like that. But they need to be able to provide drainage as well. So the in-ground soils are typically more dense, and it doesn't fare well with raised beds because it doesn't allow the drainage the way that is needed. So it's a really great start. You don't have to worry about mixing. Is it going to drain well or anything like that? The raised bed mixes are really great. If you already have a bed started, or um, you've got something that's been sitting there for a couple years, the next thing that you'll do, and every year after that, is what's called amending. So you'll amend your soil every year. Every year I add one layer of compost and another layer of raised bed mix. So the compost provides that organic materials, essentially the food needed for the next year. So you don't need to turn your soil over, anything like that. I, I, I literally just add on top every year. It's just going to add on top. Your plants and everything, watering, all that kind of stuff is really going to drain that soil of its nutrients and the things that plants need. So you really need to amend every year. Um, and then if you're doing heavy planting like I do, or plant year round, then I even recommend going into amending twice a year. So you'll amend in your spring and then you'll amend in your fall. Um, so in summary, just start out with some good raised bed mix if you're starting. If you're starting over with a bed that's already there, perhaps you've used it for a few years and you're kind of wondering why the plants aren't doing so well like they did the first year. And it's typically just you need a good amending, a new refresh.
Hmm. And we had a question in the Facebook group from T Bell who basically said, how do you either prevent or like ward off things that might be trying to eat up your garden? Because
Hmm.
that was a concern of mine as well. It's like, I don't want to attract little critters. So tell us more about that.
Yes. And I will start off by saying if you are not seeing bugs in your garden, you are not part of the ecosystem. And you want to be part of that ecosystem. We need bugs to help us pollinate, but really to just be part of this entire, circle of life. So bugs are inevitable, is what I'm going to say. Um, I can't tell you that I'm going to help you plant a garden and you'll never see a bug ever. Um, but I really feel like there is a really great balance in, if you kind of learn to what's called companion plant. And I heavily, heavily rely on companion planting. And companion planting just means that you plant other plants next to your plants that you want or that you are, plan on harvesting, that either help repel or they're the attractant. So things like garlic and chives actually do a really great job of repelling those bugs that you don't want to see. Um, and then you get to eat them. It's such a really great win-win. Basil is another one. Marigolds are another one. I load my beds up every year with tons of flowers. And I didn't do that in the beginning, but not only does it look just beautiful, it's helping with the pollination and it's helping with the companion planting. Calendula is another flower. It's a really pretty yellow flower that will actually act as the attractant. So instead of going to your tomato plants, they will cover your calendula plant. So you're not necessarily getting rid of them, but you're attracting them to another plant instead of your plant that you want them to go to.
That is
Um,
so interesting. That's really
yeah.
good. Keep going. Keep
I
going.
I actually I've done some pretty cool little lessons with that with a project that I had did a while back ago where and I think I even have maybe I can share the video where we did like this little close up and you could see this calendula plant and it was pretty amazing. I thought it was pretty resilient of this plant that was when you looked up close, it was covered in aphids. I mean, covered. You couldn't even see the surface of its stem anymore. But yet it was full of flowers still, full blooming, and those the aphids weren't on the plants that I wanted, which were the tomatoes at the time. So beneficial flowers, companion planting. I can't speak highly enough of it. Yeah. And I mean, typically you think my husband is the one of the main ones too, where it's like, why do you plant so many basil plants? We're not going to eat them. And it's not always for the eating. They really help with bugs and pests. We do eat a lot of basil and pesto, making pesto. But then at the end of the season, I let them flower and they help with the pollination and the bees. So it makes not only are you providing, this food for yourself and your family, or, you're just doing it for aesthetics or things like that, but we're also contributing to nature. The bee population is on a drastic decline. Butterfly, some specific species of butterflies are on a drastic decline. So it just kind of makes you feel good that you're doing, your little teeny tiny part in my little suburbia backyard can be completely covered in butterflies and bees sometimes and makes you feel good like you're doing a little, your little part in helping nature.
So would that be the same thing as far as like the companion planting to help like attract other bugs or whatever? Like if you have cats or raccoons or possums or things that will actually like eat it that are like bigger than bugs cuz and when you started talking about the bugs I'm like this is exactly why I don't do this because I'm not a bug or animal
Bugs.
person but like if you have other things that are coming into your yard that might eat is there anything you can do about that?
The bigger animals, unfortunately, no, there are plants that you can definitely, what I like to call your, um, what is it when you give it up to, what is it called?
Give it to the
Um,
Lord, give it to the universe.
Basically, you designate a few plants that you know that are going to go to whatever pest, right?
Mm,
So, um, those are some.
like
I
a
actually
sacrifice.
sacrifice. Yes, you've got your sacrifice plants. And sometimes that's what it takes. I've seen some really cool tools out there. There was a lady that I helped install her garden in Kyle, and it was this little mat, basically. I think she got it on like a garden online store. it looked like a mat, and it had all these little pokey things that stuck up. So basically, if any pest, including her dogs, tried to get in the garden, it's like standing on stickers or things like that. Um, and I thought that was interesting, versus going to chemicals or traps. It basically made it where any animal, whether it be a dog or a raccoon, could not get into the garden because it was a physical barrier. Um, so though, those are one option. There isn't a plant out there that is, 100% raccoon repellent or anything like that. Um, I went into vermicomposting this year, which just means that I have a worm bin, a worm compost bin that I use for my composting now. And to be quite honest, that has attracted my dogs more than anything else, which is so frustrating. I thought, because raccoons and possums, for instance, they eat bugs and they like worms. So I thought they were eating my worms, but no, it was my dog. So I got a bunch of plastic forks and I just put them in upside down. Um, and I put a brick on top of the bin, to where it just kind of make it made it a harder barrier. But if you are dealing with big issues, I have a master gardener here, that we've kind of come together, that she has a rat problem. So her house next door is was condemned, and it's basically just sitting there, and it's got rats.
Mm, mm, mm,
Um,
mm.
I know, and that to me that's terrifying. Um, and so she has gone more into like the trap side of things. And hers is a pretty big issue. So I can't imagine, she's a master gardener. So of course she's got lots of plants and vegetables. And to have so much issues can be pretty daunting. If you
Yeah.
are having big issues, I feel like a lot of times that's a one-on-one kind of scenario. So let's talk about it. Let's go into how bad of an issue is it. Do you live in the country or do you live in a suburban neighborhood like I do? So, but we can definitely tackle it. Hopefully that answer answered the question. It's not the best answer, unfortunately. There's not a fail-proof plant or companion plant that you can do to repel rats and raccoons, unfortunately.
Do you think that that they attract rats? Is that rare or is that pretty common?
Um, no, I don't think that's very common. I think occasionally you'll have more of a mice problem. Um, if if you do have an issue, but because that house is vacant, like we're talking like the big ugly rats. Um, and from what I'm looking at, it looks like they're raiding her garden more for bedding, meaning like whatever they're making their nest out of, because they're taking like her mulch and her straw and a couple of her wooden boxes, like they're just kind of chewing at her wooden boxes and they're using all of this for their nest building. Um, so they're really not even really messing with her plants per se. It's kind of just the other things. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're dealing with things like a possum, there are a few things that you can not, is it possum? An armadillo. We had an armadillo issue one time. And armadillos love bugs and grubs and things like that. But they can do a lot of damage. So like a little pig, they'll just kind of uproot all your plants. So like you'll go out and all of your plants will be dug up because they're going through the ground and searching for those grubs and worms and things like that. But they can be very destructive.
Mm-hmm.
You name it, I probably have dealt with it. Not this house, but the other house. I had chickens, um, And chickens are fabulous to have, but man, you give them an hour in your garden and they will be so destructive. They can really decimate a garden pretty quickly. I've even had a pet rabbit. I had a ranging rabbit um, that had free range, and of course, he thought that the garden was not off limits.
That's cute.
Um,
So if you're watching the replay, I just want you to put in the chat, what are you thinking about planting? Are you thinking about planting herbs? Are you trying to do I saw someone the other day on a reel that had an avocado like plant in a big bucket, and I was like, "Oh, I would love to like have my own avocado tree or something like that." What are you thinking about planting? Put that in the chat, because if you are just tuning in, we were talking about the first thing that you need to be asking yourself is, what do you want to plant and why? So that will determine a lot of how you care for your plant and your area and things to do. Again, Kim does have virtual consulting and coaching. So if you are interested in that, even if you're watching the replay later, you can put that in the chat and we'll drop the link so that you can get some garden consulting. Kim, we're going to have to do this again. I barely got into a lot of my questions that I had. So, what are kind of like the big takeaways for a beginner gardener in terms of the basic things that you need to start thinking about and doing, especially right now when it's like end of March, early April? What are the first like two or three things that you would do?
yes. So, first things is really deciding why do you want to garden? Um, and then that will help you kind of go into what you will be planting. Really evaluating your space. Do you have, half an acre that you've got so that you've got lots of space to deal with, or are you dealing with a suburbia backyard like I do? Um, then it goes into the actual getting ready or planting. So if you don't have anything and you're starting from scratch, highly recommend raised beds. If you're going with some of the bigger plants like tomatoes, is a really big one. I highly recommend 12 inches or higher. And that just means that will give you lots of more space for that roots. Tomatoes have large root systems, and they really need a whole lot of space. So that's the reason it's not recommended to grow tomatoes in a typical little um, garden pot. Um, it's really hard. Um, so highly recommend raised beds, and then really going for where you want to plant. This is probably one of my more things that I really laser focus on when I'm doing a consult. People typically want to just kind of put it out of the way. Let me put it up against the fence or something like that, or it'll look nice in this area, but it really depends a lot on your sun. So if you are in a neighborhood like I do, there are houses all around. I have a picket fence, the like most neighborhoods do. Um, and if you want a high yield or a really good tomato yield, you're going to need lots of sun. So I designated an area, and my beds are smack in the middle. So not up against the fence or anything like that. Um, some people, and it's kind of going to depend on your sun placement, really. If your sun where it rises and it falls is not great for your backyard. I have done a few beds consults where we did a garden in the front yard because that's just where this best sun was. Um, so really knowing where the best placement is. So finding some a good raised bed, um, boxed box store soil is great. I there's really I don't have anything terrible to say about. So go to your local Lowe's or Home Depot or things like that. Get some raised bed soil, and it says right on the bag, raised bed. My favorite is Kellogg, and Promix. Those are my two favorite brands. But you can go with lots. Bulk is cheaper, but typically it requires, you'd have a truck. You're going to need to have a wheelbarrow to be taking that back and forth. Um, so unless you're doing a whole lot of raised beds or some really big, big, deep ones, then I say just go with bags to fill it. Um, and then knowing your square footage. So whatever plant that you have, I'm sorry, whatever raised bed that you have, it's length times width. So whatever, just multiply the two, and that it's going to give you square footage. Um, and then know that your bigger plants, like the tomatoes and the eggplants and things like that, they're going to require at a bare minimum of that 1 square um, footage of space. I would even argue eggplant probably needs more. Eggplant to me grows like it's like you're planting a little tree. So if you think that you need just as much space as the tomato, I would say probably a little bit more. Um, and then companion plant, companion plant, companion plant, companion plant. Um, put those flowers in there. Surround that tomato plant with flowers and herbs. To me, you really can't go wrong except for mint. Let me start off with that. Do not ever, ever, ever put mint in a raised bed or really even in like a flower bed. Mint will take over and you will never get rid of it. Um, so mint is off limits. Mint is still a really great companion plant. So what I do is I have mint in a pot and I have it next to my raised beds because it does really great with repelling bugs, but you don't want it in your soil. So I still have little pots of mint around my raised beds. Um, Water source is another really big thing. Um, you've got to plan for water. I actually have an irrigation system. There's some really great ones that are over the counter now. I've even seen some at Walmart. Um, Gardening is becoming so mainstream. It's not, a personalized or customized thing anymore. I feel like it's becoming more and more common. So, a drip irrigation it will be your best friend, especially if you're in one of the hotter climates, like we are. We are in 9 A now. We were in 8B, and that just means your planting zone. So, and I go through that one on one with everyone as well. Um, you give me your location, and I'll tell you what your last freeze date is, your planting zone, and things like that. Um, yeah. So hopefully
That
I've
was
answered
good,
all the
Kim.
questions.
Yes, that was great. So much information and things that you can take away and get started with your raised bed gardens for harvesting over the summer. Again, Kim is open for garden consultant and coaching virtually. So if you're interested in that, let us know and we'll drop that link. Thank you, Kim, for being here. This was really good, really
You.
fun.
Yes, we'll definitely have to do it again. I'd love to do it again. My One of my biggest requests is a tour of my garden. It's funny, I start coaching someone and they immediately say, "I want to see your garden."
Yeah, that's
Um,
exactly what I was going to tell you.
yeah, it's a really big common request. So, and I'm happy to show you my garden. We can take a tour of my garden. I'm happy to do that.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say. Great.
Mm.
Okay, cool. Y'all drop your questions if you have questions in the chat. If you happen to be listening on the podcast and you're listening on Spotify, there is a comment section now. So you can actually leave me comments or questions and I can get back to you there. If you've been listening to the Fit Figure Formula podcast and you've been getting a lot of value and you're not yet a client, you can definitely become a formula fan by going to the show notes. That is where you can either sign up for coaching, you can book Kim. I'm going to link her links also in the podcast. Where you can book a garden consultation, but then also you can become a formula fan and contribute to the podcast. So I did want to shout out my client, Jenny. who actually is going to be on the podcast as well. So you can be on the lookout for that. But she did sign up to be a Formula fan. So I just want to give you a shout out. Thank you, Jenny. I appreciate the support. If you guys are listening in real time, April 11th is the last day for the sign up for the group program, Fit Figure Formula. And if you want to get a registered dietitian in your back pocket, if you need help with your macros and mindset, you can apply with the link in the show notes. You can apply with the link in the comments that's pinned, and we can talk about how I can help you. So, thank you guys for watching. Kim, thank you for being here, and I'll see y'all on the next one.
Thank you.